So there's an uncomfortable discussion going on right now in the wrestling world. On Monday, they decided that in order to get as many wrestlers on the card as possible, WWE was going to have a fabulous Moolah Battle Royal. I couldn't be happier about canceling my subscription to the network. Um, so, and I get it, Mania will be Mania and whatever, but um, Moolah's a guy. Moolah's a wrestler they haven't talked about in a long time. Why is that? Well, there's some very uncomfortable reasons why they haven't talked about her. And now those reasons, which had always been rumored and rumbled about, and there was always been shoot interviews. Shoot interviews are great. If you're a wrestling fan and you've never looked up shoot interviews about stuff from the 80s and 90s, there are some stories. The stories about Moolah go back to the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. It goes back to the way she trained these girls to wrestle. It goes back to, and I use girls because she wasn't training them to be wrestlers. She was training them to be lady wrestlers. And just the way that she generally treated the other women, like where sideshow were to be sideshows. Apparently out of her wrestling school was a bunch of hair pulling. So she'd teach just the slapping, hair pulling, and that kind of thing. And she bullied these ladies. And she was champ for, I think it was 35 years she was champ. Well, there's a reason. Nobody was ever able to build themselves up to go against her. Nobody could be better than she was. And there were a lot of rumors about how she was on the territories and how she treated these ladies and certain things that were expected of them. And again, I'm not getting into the exact allegations, but the interesting thing is, so WWE right now is Ronda Rousey, right? Ronda Rousey coming in, UFC champ, right? And they've built up this girl here, Alexa Bliss, to be a bona fide champion, even though she's only 5 feet tall. And you got Sasha Banks. Like, look, I'm decked out in gear that's about the women wrestlers, and I enjoy the women wrestlers. And I realized I don't want to pay for the network just to see Shinsuke, AJ, and the women, and then the rest of it. I don't know. I'll watch it on Raw and SmackDown, but the pay-per-views are sort of meh. And that's the thing, like, when you're going to have a battle royal to talk about women who've defined and reinvigorated things, I don't think of Moolah, because when Moolah was champ, I remember, I'm old enough to remember when Moolah was champ. She lost the belt to Wendy Richter at the first WrestleMania. I was so happy. I loved Wendy Richter. I thought she was cute. I thought this and that. This is the 80s, right? Lady wrestlers, the bar was set a lot lower. But, Wendy Richter, solid wrestler, and yet she held the title for a very short period of time before the Spider Woman, which was Moolah, we all knew it was Moolah, took the title back. And Moolah held on to it for a while after that. Even though Moolah at that point I don't think of her as being a draw. I don't think of her as being a particularly great wrestler at that point. But she was fabulous Moolah, so she kept the title, and she was, from all accounts, not happy about the idea of Wendy Richter being the top lady wrestler in the company, and yet she should have been. That was her spot. She'd earned it. And then, of course, WrestleMania, I think it was WrestleMania 2, she fought Velvet McIntyre, and I think that match lasted 2.5 minutes. Like, it was just, and it was a botch fest, and it was just, women's wrestling at that point was at a low. So if you're going to do some kind of a match that honors women's wrestling being better than what it was, then, I don't know, put Lita's name on it. Have it the Lita, but I mean, Lita's got a contract with the company. Heck, put Vicky Guerrero's name on it. Something. But don't put Moolah's name on it and then say stuff about equality, because there was no equality when she was a wrestler. When she was a wrestler, the women were just a sideshow. They were out there for 2 or 3 minutes, and that's it. That was really all they had, was those couple of minutes, and then out you go. And they weren't treated like wrestlers. They were just a commodity. And this is the thing, too, though. And I'm going to say this, not defending Moolah, but the way the whole wrestling industry worked in the 80s was completely different. The way that promoters was completely different. You can't get away with that crap now. And, I mean, on the indies, I'm sure it happens from time to time. But it was a different industry. And the access to drugs and everything else was... I mean, it's still there now. I know there are still wrestlers that struggle with that kind of stuff now, but it was different. And I'm kind of surprised and disappointed at the same time that WWE is honoring an era and a wrestler who they really probably shouldn't. The one thing I will say is this. I'm very proud of Twitter at times like this because fans are not letting them off the hook. And there's a couple petitions on change.org. I signed one. They don't go anywhere. WWE doesn't care. But honestly, the really negative media attention and the fact this has hit the mainstream media, they care about that. WWE loves it. And again, Ronda Rousey. They've got this great storyline of this woman who revolutionized women's fighting in UFC. And before Ronda Rousey, Dana White said, oh, there's no way I'm going to have women in the octagon. It's just not going to happen. She changed it. She made it so women could be in the octagon. I don't know. Maybe you could have the Ronda Rousey Battle Royal. I don't know. Something. But I'm very glad that social media is not letting them get away with this. And they shouldn't. And I fully expect it to not necessarily get changed, but maybe they'll slowly pull the name off of it or something. Because Andre the Giant was a legend, and he was a great man. And he did some stuff too. But most of the stuff he did is just kind of seedy. And it's not necessarily the kind of things that Moolah's being accused of. I don't recall Andre having any kind of a ring of guys he was sending out to territories for purposes of things that I can't say in this video and manage to keep monetized. But it's quite the controversy, and WWE needs to address it. Now they're going to have to answer some uncomfortable questions, because this is part of my problem I've had with the women's revolution. Okay, they've got Alexa Bliss, they've got Sasha Banks, they've got all these very solid women's wrestlers like Becky Lynch, who's fantastic. And I've got my Becky Lynch goggles here. Really solid wrestlers. And then for what do you give them for matches? Oh, that's like 8 of them against each other, and their feuds don't make any sense, if there's feuds at all. And there's too much of that. It happens in the men's division too, but it's happening a lot with the women. And I expected it with WrestleMania because, again, it's your biggest payday of the year as a wrestler. So WWE wants to get as many wrestlers on the card as possible. That's why it's supposed to be a 5-hour show this year, which is insane. I don't have any interest in watching 5 hours of wrestling. But WWE is in a rough place, because now they have to prove that they actually want women's wrestling to be on par with men's. And in order to do that, you can't be giving thanks to a bygone era that just doesn't really need to be recognized or remembered. A lot of touchy jokes were made. There was an interesting one made, though, and I will agree with this. If you had named, and I'm talking about WWE, if they had named this Battle Royal after Nancy Benoit, that would have made more sense. Nancy Benoit was a woman in WCW, and she was Chris Benoit's wife at the time of the tragic incident that took place there. Since that happened, WWE has been much more stringent about its protocols with concussions. Since that took place and we found out just how many concussions Chris Benoit had suffered in his life, the WWE's been better. And we can all disagree about whether or not Daniel Bryan should be wrestling, but I am fine with them saying, you know what? We're going to distance ourselves because we don't want to see that happen again. Absolutely 100% agree with them on that. And if they named it after Nancy Benoit, and if they were having a real conversation, because to me, the company pays lip service, so they'll say, oh yeah, women's revolution, and then the only thing that's really changed is the women's matches are a little longer. They will let them have the main event once in a while, and they don't have to take their clothes off. But other than that, you know, it still feels like the women are here and the men are just way up here, and there's no actual equal time. And I've always wondered if they could actually just have a wrestling show from WWE that's just women's wrestling, and I would watch that. I would probably watch that faster than I watch Raw and SmackDown. You could make that work. You could absolutely make that work. They have so many women wrestlers right now. But that's the problem. There are so many realistic ways that they could be talking about inequality, and yet they don't. It's sort of like during February when they have Black History Month, and they play it lip service, and then it goes away. And they don't. And again, if your company's going to address something like equality, then address it. But to dress it up and make money off of it, and then say, well, and that's kind of what it feels like they're doing with this Battle Royal. wrong name on it. Let me know whose name you think should be on it in the comment section below. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. And thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.